We come now to Chapter 13 of Drumlin Fever. It's called The Alarm. Debbie's head lay on her forearm as her eyes slowly opened. She saw the needles and the wildflowers. There appeared to be great fields, and here and there beasts hurrying about their business. The needles became strange living sticks as big as trees, the wild leeks and other plants monsters of the encroaching forest. Her eyes wandered over these, looking for living creatures. One emerged, walking up the side of a plant, a true monster reminding Debbie of the huge trucks that carried other trucks on their backs in the highways, or perhaps the forester's machine with an elevated arm in which the little man sat to cut trees. But this monster's head had two huge eyes and short forelegs rubbed together, stretching its great sharp claws. It stood absolutely still, halfway up the monster tree. She shuddered and looked away. It was then that she saw the mountain. It rose from the plain with its stick trees and its monster trees like a sheer wall of rock. Its surface was smooth except for halfway up, where it was deeply scarred as though some great machine had ploughed there, parallel but curving down its face. That was it. Those lines made only the face it had. No clear definition of nose and eyes, but lines that gave the whole blank mountain an expression of puzzled concentration, the furrows in the brow of an otherwise faceless head. The texture of the mountain itself was beautiful. Debbie could see great shining crystals, dark like garnets, light like topaz, some clear as diamond, making up the whole surface of its face. On one side there seemed to grow a kind of green vegetation, fine shrubs pressed together, making a mat all along the left side and out of sight. And in the crystals of the rock she could see reflected the blue sky and clouds turned on her back. Oh, Lindy, look. The two girls were looking now at the sky such as they had never seen before. It was like the inside of a great dome of glass, and iridescent ripples of color radiated out from where the sun seemed to be. They could not see the sun just as well, but knew it was there, behind the fantastic great crystal. Clouds crossed their sky like wispy fog or mist, and seemed to have no dark side, only a bright ridge towards the focus of the sun, and a colored edge the other side. Wonderful, said Debbie. Then a strange thing began to happen. The sun's focus began moving slowly down behind the mountain, and the rays of the color on their sky's dome became more brilliant and deeper. At the same time behind them, they were fully aware, and then they saw a line of darkness move across the sky, blurring at the edges, but inky black behind. Soon the darkness filled half the sky and moved quickly to blot out the light. Then, as the final rays of light disappeared in a red glow behind the mountain, their sky filled up with bright spots of stars, twinkling and moving, like a dust of tiny lights stretched across their vision. About 4 o'clock, Thelma went out and called the boys. Her own two were playing near the barn, but Bartholomew had gone home. There had been a great wash-up after the morning's adventures, and the boys had poured out their story over their lunch. This was another of the days her husband was not working in the neighborhood, so he was not there to share in the news and to exclaim, as he did, over the horrors of the Triple O. I wonder, she had said at lunch, when it will end, how it will end, or if it will end before they tear up the countryside and make it look like Oak Ridges. Oak Ridges village was a rural slum, taking its name from the sandhill-studded moraine that stretched across Ontario from Orangeville to Trenton. Thelma had lived there briefly as a child while her Ukrainian-born parents were making their escape from living in Toronto. Gee, if only the traces were still around, Bran has put in. He was still feeling bloodthirsty after his narrow escape. You mean get them to shoot up old Triple O? The thought had tickled Kevin. Or run them down with tractors and set their houses on fire. I wouldn't wish the traces even on Triple O, said Thelma. I can see their usual performance of setting barns on fire and stealing cattle and equipment might harass the Triple O schemers and cheats. We were ready to get around the simple, the widow, and the fatherless, and do them out of their inheritance. Triple O is doing that, not only robbing the inheritance of rural Ontario, but probably cheating the people, buying the small plots of land to right and left. The rate of interest alone is a sin. Tracy's only killed each other, eh, Mum? Well, they killed off one brother, and someone not in the family went to prison for it. The conversation had dwindled, as Kevin went into a daydream about setting him out of puny traces to cheat and pillage the Triple O. Thelma thought soberly about the disruption of country life that the Triple O invasion were likely to bring, and the dirty politics people were preparing to play in order to buy bigger cars and to tear down rambling old houses and replace them with the latest long, low boxes they had seen on the TV from Buffalo or Rochester. But now it was mid-afternoon. Thelma had fallen asleep and had just wakened up to realize that her girls had not returned. The boys came running to call her. Kevin, have you seen the girls? No, Mum. They were taking a picnic to the toy village. See if we can find them. She reflected on Kevin's bad relations with the girls. And take Brian with you if he feels all right. Okay, Mum. I'll go too, said Brian. It was an hour later when the boys returned. There was no sign of the girls at the toy village, but there had been a spot in the grass adjoining the field where there were traces of their having eaten. Kevin and Brian had returned to the road allowance and gone down to the sand hills and even crossed the road to Morganston and looked in at the creek on the back road to Norham. They had not occurred to them to look back to their respective scenes of battle, since they thought the girls would have been having their lunch about the same time as their brothers' adventures. They must have gone to Warkworth, Mum, but they never go without letting me know. Thelma was worried, added to the general feeling of insecurity, with talk of the Triple O and the traces for lunch. Her children had disappeared. She went to the phone and called her sister-in-law, the mayor's wife. She explained the situation. If you wouldn't mind, dear, taking a look down at the pond, you might be looking at the swimmers, and just drive along the main street in case you see them. I'll send the boys down on their bicycles if you don't see them in 15 or 20 minutes. So now you take water. George Wiseman was talking over the pasture fence to Professor Cart. Them geologist fellows from Toronto can measure and survey and take samples all around the place, but not one of them can find water as good as the Witcher. He's got his little stick, which don't cost all that money, and taxpayers' money at that, and that little stick tells him just where he should put the well, and most of the time it tells him right. How do you explain that? I can't. Some people talk about imagined magnetism, but we don't think of magnetism between water and wood. Now tell me if I'm wrong, but it's generally held that the moon carries tides. Yes, answered the professor. Now, if that moon, so far away, can pull all that water around, why can't a pile of water under the ground pull a little stick? I agree that we should at least be open-minded. Now, Professor, you take water. Water is a mighty funny thing. Scace's hill is full of water. Scace's well has never gone dry, and down there in the cedars, why, old man Scace had to pour loads and loads of dirt in, and the quicksand still had to be fenced off to protect the cattle. And the oil drum he set in the quicksand never empties of water. Can you explain that? Well, that's a catchment area. Yes, a catchment area over the hill. But now I hear, well, from Hans Erkelins, leastwise from Truman McQuaid, who had it from Hans, and Hans had it from some fella at the Triple O, that all that land those city fellows bought at the foot of Scace's hill is absolutely dry. Not a drop of water to be had, not even in the watercourses. Now, how do you suppose that could be? Does sound strange, but water doesn't always run downhill, you know. George looked at the professor with his head on one side and repeated, Not downhill? On the outside of a hill it will always run downhill, but inside a hill it's governed by the rules of hydraulics, which is the system by which water runs in pipes or town water system. Pressure in one part of the hill can keep the water table high in another part of the hill, and these pressures and vacuums that control the water depend on the rocks and soils found in the hill. Limestone country, quite different from this, of course, has vast underground caverns full of water. This kind of glacial formation has clays and gravels that form water barriers and great sponges that soak up water. The professor leaned down and picked up a smooth pillow. When your plough turns up even one of these little stools, it may be the first time that stone has seen daylight since the glacier passed over the pebble and carved it into a smooth shape by the action of water and ice and other rock. So down underground there is clay and rocks and sand and mud. They have been there all the time. Some of the water itself down there is still chilly from the deep frost of the glacial age. It may not be released for hundreds of years from now, when someone drills far enough into it. Then it will be replenished by water soaking in from the surface. Now you see, the water stays up in the hill, but there may be no way for it to get down to the Triple O property. But why should it suddenly dry up down there? George's question must remain unanswered, for at that moment Bartholomew Cart came running from the field. For once he was not doing play acting and word exercises as he came. Dad, Mrs. Scace is on the telephone, and she says Debbie and Linda are lost. Nobody can find them at all. Supper at Scace's that night was a grim affair. There was no sign of the girls in the village where news of their disappearance had gone around. Small groups of people gathered at various places trying to conceal their worry with exterior unconcern. One group of teenage children looked anxiously at the pond and then beat upstream, wondering if the girls had fallen in. The village's best plumber and some of his employees delayed going home after a long day to follow the river downstream through the cow meadows, which was a kind of inferior village parkland. Telephone calls were made to the prison, to Norham, and to the Ontario Provincial Police. There was not much stir in Norham, but the poultry farmer drove over to Norham Pond and looked at the dam and the marsh, all without result. An OPP cruiser had been sitting in Morganton when the radio call came in. The two officers cruised slowly up County Road 25 towards Warkworth, looking carefully into the fields on both sides of the road as they went. Then at the Norham crossroad they turned off and went parallel to the Salt River, passing Cartagena on the way, just a few minutes after George Wiseman had driven off on his tractor and the carts had gone indoors. The police drove on top the back way to Country Road 29 and came quickly on to where the rambling Scace homestead decorated the brow of the hill. They arrived just 15 minutes after Albert had returned home. Thelma had given him the news and gone over the possibilities, and the boys had given a delightful report on their search. In all this, Thelma was calm, but increasingly worried. But when the police arrived, and after she had given her story, she could no longer keep up her volunteerlessness, and went upstairs to weep on her bed. It was Father Brian, who brought her water to drink and lay beside her, saying nothing. Police drove off, and Albert and Kevin turned on one another, enraged, their usual reaction to stress. This probably wouldn't have happened if you weren't so nasty to your sisters. and they could have had a lunch at the house as usual. I heard all about that row you had with them yesterday. You should be ashamed of yourself. It wasn't my fault. The girls pick on me all the time, and you take their side. You never listen to me. Don't you talk to me like that. You know perfectly well there's no excuse for the way you carry on at your age with that children, and girls at that, younger than yourself. Now get out and start looking all over again. Kevin returned, stormed out the front door, his hair blazing in the sunlight. It was still long before midsummer sunset, but the sky was suddenly red. He saw a flower pot on the ground and gave it a violent kick, watching it fly down the slope and spill the plants and earth. Then he burst into tears, spluttering all the four-letter words he could remember, and sometimes made up yet, and limped off, nursing the toe that had felt the full shock of the kick. It wasn't his fault. The girls had been told not to wander off, and he had not been anywhere near them. They shouldn't blame him all the time, but they did anyway. He hated them. Daddy was the bad temper, and Mummy, who was cool, and Bossy, who was upstairs crying like a baby because of her precious little girls. He hoped they were both dead. No, he didn't. He stopped by the barn. He didn't hope they were both dead. He saw for the first time that he really loved them, remembering how cute they had been as babies, and how much like puppies or kittens, but so much better, and how he had been jealous of their grace and loveliness. He hoped they weren't dead. It was his fault, not that he had done anything to do with their being lost, but it was his fault for hating them and wishing them dead. There were funny things in this world that sometimes happened if you were unlucky. Your secret inner deepest wishes came true, and they wouldn't have if you hadn't wished them. Or perhaps it was his fault, not only wishing them dead, but what he had done with the toy village. Perhaps they had found out and been so unhappy that they had drowned themselves in the pond or the river. They'd heard his mother talking to someone about draining the pond to look for them. He could see them piteously lying at the bottom like dolls, stained and bedraggled and smelling of slime, broken bottles around them. He ran off into the field, forgetting his limp, wailing. The end of chapter 13.